Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. If everything seems like a blur, then you want the advice of our guest, Susan Ford Collins. Susan, thanks for being with us today.
Delighted to be with you.
Susan, you have a book with, as I said to you before the show, one of the most interesting titles, Blur, Clear the Way Ahead. Now, we're used to words like laws of attraction and goal setting, and your word is blur, just the opposite. It would seem like, something we don't want. So what does blur really mean? How does that fit in?
Well, I went through the loss of my husband, the loss of my sister, my daughter having cancer, and then we all got hit by COVID. And I talked to so many people, so many clients who said they were in blur. I kept hearing the word blur over and over. And then I decided that sounds like a great title for a book. So when I started writing it and I said to people, I'm writing on a blur, they said, I want a copy. I'm in it. I know exactly what you're talking about. But my definition is a muddled state that we get in when we're hit by too many changes too frequently without enough time between them to recover. And that seems to fit my life, but it seems to fit the world since COVID and since all of the things that have been going on. So blur is, I think, the word of the day. So
I was going to say,
that's what I came up with.
Most authors say to me, I say, who is your book for? They say everybody. And it's really not. It's for a large segment of population. But you, right. I think you're absolutely right. I think we're all in blur. Now, is this something we see more in our personal life, business life, or both?
I think we see both. And I'm a consultant to a lot of corporations around the country. I work with CEOs and HR departments, and they have experienced blur. Teachers have experienced blur when the kids couldn't be at school and they had to be learning with their parents at home. They weren't set up for that. So there's just been so many bombardments, so many changes that whether it's at home or at work or in our world, I think it's left us in this state I call blur.
When I first started reading your book, I put a note to myself that I can see if this happens, if there's a death of a loved one or someone close to us, if we go through a divorce, an illness, a bankruptcy, maybe a personal setback, the loss of a job, or we lost our living space, whether it's an apartment or a home or something. But it seems like now this is kind of all-encompassing. It's no longer just a big event. It can be almost continuous. Am I understanding it correctly?
Well, and it's more not one event. It's a collision of one event after another, after another, after another, where we don't even catch our breath before the next one comes. So, it's that inability to recover, to get our wits about us. It's finding ourselves in a parking lot and not being able to get our car. It's like we're dizzy, we're disoriented, we're stressed, we can't think clearly.
I think that's an excellent word, and I don't know if you used it on purpose, but you said collision. I wrote it down, collision of events. Yes. And that's just what it seems like. Sometimes like three cars are pulling out, and you can't see the one behind you. They're not looking at you, and wham, all three of you hit. And that seems like life today with everything we're thrown at, or is thrown at us.
Good metaphor.
And
well done.
Well, no, you're the one who brought it up, and I'm just wondering. I mean, and we've said this with other guests for different aspects of their topic. But if I go into a restaurant, there's a TV on. In the doctor's office, there's a TV, or at least music, or at least the news station. I really can't get away. I'm in the car. Of course, I hear my car radio. If we're not listening to that, we're on the phone or we're getting a text or something. So we're honestly bombarded, and maybe it's a collision at times.
We have the phone in our ear.
Yeah.
I mean, we're never really off. We could be reached 24/7. It used to be that you work 9 to 5. Well, now you work 24/7.
I just said to someone the other day, wasn't it nice that we worked during the era when you got to Friday at 5 o'clock, the work week was over? And now it's just a continuation. Maybe you have time to go to the bathroom and have dinner, but if a parent wants to get in touch with a teacher, if your boss wants you, if a client calls and says, can we have the sales meeting tomorrow rather than Monday, there goes your Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon or Sunday,
And the
whatever
world
it
is
takes.
global. So, we get calls in the middle of the night and they don't realize they're calling us in a 12-hour different time frame. So, it's a whole different place. That's why it's this collision. It's this bombardment. It's this one thing after another relentlessly that our brains were not designed for. If you think back, we weren't designed to have input every second or millisecond.
No,
That's what we got today.
Perfectly true. Now, how do most of us deal with it? Do we just turn on Dr. Phil and hope he'll hit that topic today?
Oh, I think a lot of people drink more than they used to.
Okay.
Eat more than they used to. Turn on mindless TV. Netflix is always there to fill us up with some new movie or episodes, and we can stream them and watch them one after another and just numb ourselves, so that we have a feeling of peace and quiet, even though it isn't peaceful and it isn't quiet. And worse yet, even though we are not solving the problems that we face. That's the big part. Even though we are not solving the problems we face, we're just numbing ourselves. And that's what leaves us in blur, is that there's a part of our brain that knows we haven't solved it. It's still sitting there. And that part is the reticular activating system, and I call it the RAS. It's that part of the brain that wakes you up in the night when you said you were going to call your mother and you didn't, and then your brain wakes you up at 2 a.m. and says, "Did you call Mom?"
Well,
and you go, "No," and you can't go back to sleep,
I want to get back at my RAS because it's been doing that a lot to me. And with me, it wakes me up at about 4 a.m. And then I go back off and then I get back together. And a few minutes later, my wife says, "Well, are you getting up?" And it's like, wait, did I just have my full sleep? And some days it's okay. And other days there's maybe 20 minutes to anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour or two missing from that sleep. Now, you talk about that details of our memory are very important, and you talk about past and future memories, which it almost sounds like a mistake, future memories. But can you tell me where that fits in, and past and future memories, and why we're supposed to remember the details, as you did in your book?
Well, I think when people get in blur, they try to forget what's going on. They try to numb themselves or, eat too much or drink too much or watch too much TV. But try to avoid remembering. And the fact is, we as humans were designed to remember. We were designed to remember the lions and the tigers. We were designed to remember where we fell in the hole or drowned in the river, or somebody we knew drowned in the river. We are wired to remember. So trying to forget things that are going on simply doesn't work. It just postpones it. It puts it off, which is stressful because we know it's still there and we know we haven't dealt with it. So the reticular activating system, or the RAS, is that part of the brain that's there to help us to remember and make the changes that are needed. But, when we get overwhelmed, we tend not to want to hear it. Shut up, RAS. I don't want to hear it. I'm doing everything I can do. But the way out of blur is remembering in detail. You said it just right. Remembering the losses, remembering the things that happened to you, the job loss, all the changes, the things you're trying to avoid in a very conscious way. And I teach you in the book how to do it in a process I call updating. And that is thinking about it in neutral, seeing yourself up on a screen, reliving it, putting it out of you, but getting the knowledge from that experience that you should get without having to go through all the pain again. Now, so that updating process is really important to deal with when you're in blur.
Susan, you talk about how details are so important. And in your book, you start out telling us about a situation with your own home going through a hurricane or a tornado, and it was devastating. It wasn't one of these where you got lucky and it just sent a few branches over. It knocked you and your lifestyle for a loop for several months, I think, and really put you out where you had a pond of fish that were incapacitated.
Well, so let me clarify that, since we're talking about details. It was a tornado followed 3 hours later by a hurricane.
Oh, both of them. Okay, that's great.
Yes. And, the house was 11 palm trees through the roof. I live in Miami. Dripping water everywhere. Roof cracked. And then a month later, Albert was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And a month after that, my sister was diagnosed with 2 extreme cancers. And a year after that, my daughter had an extensive skin cancer and renovations.
And Susan, just for our audience, when you say Albert, that's your husband, am I correct?
Albert, yes.
Yeah, just so that our audience knows. Well, we want to ask you more about that, but at this point in the show, I'd just like to let our audience know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Today we're talking to Susan Ford Collins. She's the author of the book Blur, Clear the Way Ahead, even in the worst of times. And Susan, can you tell us, is there a website where we can learn more information about you and the book?
Yes, keep it simple, SusanFordCollins.com. Or, blur to clear, but SusanFordCollins.com. I'm on social media all over the place, so I'm easy to find. And I answer emails, so by all means, reach out. I'll be happy to.
Okay,
respond.
You're the perfect person. You answer the emails,
Exactly.
And you have a book that, honestly, like I said, most guests, they say, oh, my book is for everybody, and I'm shaking my head to myself. Okay, a lot of people, but not everybody. But your book really is, because I think we're all in this mode today, unless you're a little baby and, getting the bottle put into your mouth and you're not taking in what's around you. I think we're all falling into the state, and I know I do, especially if I get hit with a few things at once, where it's just overload, information overload, let's call it that. A
pediatrician friend of mine said, Susan, don't write off the baby. She said, I'm seeing babies in blur. They're not sleeping, young children clinging to their parents, mommy, 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 daddy, 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 because they're picking up on our anxiety. They're getting blur from us. So it's affecting the youngest of our peoples as well as us.
Now, we were talking about details, and I'm just wondering, I would think, and this may be wrong, but I would think that I would want to remember all the details of a good event, a really good dinner, if I'm going out on a date, if I go to a concert, or if a child or a grandchild has a victory, whether it's in sports or they're a concert player. As opposed, but it seems like in your story in the book, which was a negative event, the hurricane and the tornado, you brought out the details to make that point. Do we want to remember details in negative events or all events, or just the positive?
No, we want to remember details because that's what our brain needs. And let me just say why that's so important, because based on past memories, we are able to create future memories, and you might call them plans or dreams. But we take those details that we've remembered from our past and we use them to build future memories or future dreams, which pull us forward, which motivate us. Having worked at NIH, if you don't have a dream, you don't get there. It's pretty clear. And I met Dr. Carl Prybram when I was at NIH, and he said that some thoughts are more powerful than other thoughts. And he was literally at Stanford able to measure the power of a thought. Which thoughts are more powerful? The ones that are more detailed, the ones you can see, hear, feel, touch, and smell. Now, caution, you don't want to go back and remember all the most painful things in what I call in gear, like through your body. What I want you to do is learn the updating skill, which is pretty easy. It's about putting it up on the screen, seeing it like you're a player in a movie, but you're sitting in the audience and you're not feeling it all. And using that distant knowledge to be able to figure out what could be learned, what I didn't remember, what I need to find out more about. And then asking people who are around you to fill in the details. Because one of the things that keeps us awake at night is not knowing. Not knowing is a terrible sleep inhibitor, but I don't know, but I don't remember. So it is really important to get the details. And yes, I'm telling the truth, past memories and future memories, we create them. I mean, it sounds like they're memories that are going to happen in the future. No, they are memories that we're creating about the future, goals, dreams, and detailed ones, according to Dr. Carl Prybram.
Now, Susan, I'm thinking of a friend of mine. He's a high-level executive, but I could see a few years ago he was in a position where he was very unhappy. It wasn't a good match for his culture, matching the company's, And it just wasn't a good fit. And every time you were around him, you could tell he was different. Fast forward, he went to another company. Now it's a good match all the way through. You can see such a difference. But you say that forgetting something isn't healing. I would think if you're in a situation like that, and again, we're using the job, but it could be a marriage, it could be a personal situation. I would think you'd want to put that in the rear or out of your mind and put new and positive and exciting thoughts in, all the good things of the new job, how I'm enjoying every day, maybe even something as simple as a good lunchroom and easy parking or something.
Well, I agree with you, but it's a two-part process. What you're saying is absolutely true. First, you have to remember and clarify what happened so you can learn from it. And then to move forward, it's like, ways in a car. You have to set your destination. You have to put it in correctly. You have to give it the right details. Otherwise, it can't help you find the location you're trying to reach. So yes, we've got to clarify the past and learn from it. And then we've got to create detailed plans and dreams. And it's those neat detailed plans and dreams that pull us forward, that move us past blur into new life and new excitement. So one of the things that I did, and I talk about in the book, is after the house was devastated and the insurance company finally paid me the money, I took a lot of time to recreate my home in detail, the gardens, the bedrooms, all of those things that had been devastated. Why? Because I wanted new life. I wanted to feel that I had personal power again. And it's beautiful. I love it.
That's interesting because that personal power, you regained control. The nature took over your house for a period of maybe hours. I don't know how long between the hurricane and the tornado, but I'm guessing between the two, at least 4 to 6 hours, maybe longer. And I think we all like to feel we have control of whatever situation we're in, even if it's a small manner of control, but we have control. We can't stop the rain, but we can open an umbrella. But yes. I like the way you say it, that by getting back to the details and getting your garden, your pond, the roof of the house, everything pretty much the way you wanted, either way it was before or the way you wanted it after the hurricane, you've regained control and I guess a feeling of confidence and competence. Would that be a good statement?
It's very true. And in Blur, I also tell the stories about entrepreneurs who looked at where the blur was coming from after COVID and who came up with solutions. For example, Waze, or for example, Venmo, or for example, Zoom. I mean, Zoom was created by a Chinese graduate student whose girlfriend lived 10 hours away by train. And on those 10 hours, he would sit there going, I've got to come up with a way to communicate remotely. And then he finally, on the ninth try, got a visa to the U.S., went to work for WebEx, and became their director of collaborative software. And he had Zoom up and running for us just as COVID struck. And he had thought it through so that it was simple enough that even a grandmother could speak to her grandchildren, or people could have team meetings. So, a lot of people are making those plans for the what ifs. Then when we get them, we've got to have the self-confidence to go back in there and say, okay, I can learn this. I can figure out Zoom. Or in a lot of cases, go to your kids and say to them, teach me how to do it.
I always kid people. I say, if you have trouble with the computer, just yell to a little kid, can you come in here for 5 minutes and pay him, or give him a free lunch or a coupon to the local ice cream store?
Because they've grown up with it.
And they're more comfortable. Oh, sure. And they go click, click, click. And I'm fiddling with it for hours and always afraid that if I touch the white button or the left button, I'm going to go off into space someplace, or a rocket ship will come, or aliens will pick me up, whatever. Susan, before we go ahead, once again, I want our audience to know that if you're tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Susan Ford Collins. Her book is Blur, Clear the Way Ahead, Even in the Worst of Times. And Susan, would you tell us the website where we can find out more information?
Well, let's make it easy. SusanFordCollins.com.
Can't get any easier. It's perfect. And
Blur is on Amazon. So, I mean, like any other book. And it's also on Audible. So it's easy to find the book. And people have told me that it just really helped them to get clear and to start moving forward again.
And
that was my purpose.
I think this would be a great conversation starter, whether it's at a cocktail party or a wedding or a, mixer or even a business networking event, to say to someone, are you experiencing blur? Oh my gosh, what is that? Is that my eyesight, or is it something in work, or does it happen in the accounting department or the IT department? But because again, I don't think most of us have heard this word. It's certainly not one I've come across till I saw your book, and of course, I had to read it because I have to find out what blur is. So
I knew that word meant what you understood it to mean. It clicked.
You're like the Cinnabon of the literary field. I can't pass Cinnabon. I cannot go by it because that smell is so good. It keeps pulling me back and saying, come back. Just even if you want the small one, just come back and get it. So that's the way I'm always going to remember you. Now, as people, do we tend to dwell too much on the negative factors of life? I certainly do, and I'm just wondering what you experience when you work with people.
Well, I think a lot of people generate a lot of fears that they spend a lot of hours trying to prevent or push off or get rid of. I mean, the Bible says your fears will come upon you. I would say that the scientists that I work with at NIH say what you think is what you get, like it or not. So since that's the truth about how the brain works, then think about what you do want instead of what you don't want. And then you'll get more of what you want instead of getting your fears coming upon you.
Now,
so it's pretty simple, actually, scientifically.
You mentioned NIH. Would you tell our audience what that is?
Yes, the National Institutes of Health. I was a research psychologist there at the beginning of my career, and I was that youngest member on the team who stood up one day and said, I think we're on the wrong track. We should be studying highly successful people and figuring out what they're doing, not just ill and dysfunctional ones. And I'm a pretty confident person, but in that moment, I turned bright red because the whole room laughed. And I had to make probably the most important decision of my life. And that was that I wasn't wrong, that I had been studying this, I had been thinking about this. Their laughter was not deserved. They just didn't understand what I wanted and where my research wanted to go. So I spent the next 20 years shadowing the greats of the planet. And what I found is if you get very high intention, you get lucky. So I literally bumped into Buckminster Fuller, who was one of the people at the top of my list that I wanted to shadow because he was a highly successful architect. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, I like you, young woman. You've got spunk. Of course you can shadow me. And so I shadowed the greats of the planet for 3 months at a time. They didn't know, they couldn't tell me, but I discovered 10 skills they were all using. And then I went back to them and I said, did you know that you do this and this and this? And I went through the skills and they went, yeah. Doesn't everyone? I said, no, that's the point. Everyone doesn't do it. And you aren't teaching it to everyone on your team either. And so what I can do for you is teach your team what you're doing that you don't know how to teach them. And so I became a sensation in the consulting business. I did 4,000 training programs within about 10 years.
Susan, two things, and I remember this from your book, and I laughed as I read it. When you met and dealt with Buckminster Fuller, throughout your book, you were on a very close relationship because you refer to him as Bucky. And somehow if you're on that relationship where you can add a Y or an I at the end of somebody's name, you're either close friends or it's a puppy or a cat or something. And I love the way you kept saying that.
He's someone I really, really admired. He's not with us anymore, but I mean, he was a genius. And he got laughed at regularly. So he understood. That's why he thought I had spunk and why he was willing to help me. And he did. He opened up his Rolodex.
In those days, sure. Yeah.
All the ways of keeping addresses that we have now. But he referred me to a lot of people, and it grew like a tree. So,
also, even though you said you were laughed at and turned red at the time, just for our audience, I want to repeat what you said. You, speaking at the National Institutes of Health to the people you worked with, You said
Yes.
we're studying the dysfunctional people, which of course medically is good, and that's what you're there for. And you've got to find ways to cure illnesses.
Starting
But
point.
why not look at the successful people and fill in the spaces with what they're doing correctly, whether it's practicing, going to school, learning new traits, or positive thinking or goal setting, whatever might hit that checkbox. But now we're laughing about it, but it's both a simple and a brilliant comment. And at the time, as you said, they kind of looked at you and thought, what are you saying? And here you're the one giving the lectures and walking around with Bucky and getting advice from him. So,
Well,
now,
and CEOs begged me after they saw how powerful these skills were in their companies. They begged me to teach these skills to parents because they said, wouldn't it be wonderful if parents model these skills for their kids? And then teachers, Susan, please teach it to teachers too. Teachers could reinforce it in school. And then when people came into the workplace, they'd be ready to work. And they wouldn't have to go back and teach these skills. They wouldn't have to hire me. I said, that'd be okay with me. So I wrote a book called Their Children Are Watching and spent 2 years touring the country, speaking with teachers and schools, and I'm working now on creating technology of success schools around the country. Because, just because you know math and science doesn't mean that you know the success skills you need to use that knowledge.
I think that's a great idea. And again, I've passed these kindergarten schools and tutoring schools, and not to make a joke of it, but there's also soccer schools, karate schools, swimming schools, and all with good reason. We're learning a certain skill, but certainly success. If I think everybody wants their children, if they can get that, they can move it into different places, whether it's learning golf, learning French, going into the sciences, the STEM areas of education, all of that, I think would help.
Because these 10 skills is a common set of skills that goes across all areas of knowledge.
Susan,
and that's the power of it.
Unfortunately, the best shows go much too quickly, and this Zoom, this is a blur to me now today because it went by so quickly. But before we wrap up, I want to tell our audience the book is Blur. It's easy to remember, BLUR. You can have a lot of fun just asking your friends, are you experiencing blur? And you'll be the only one who knows what that means. And then you can say, well, I read the book by Susan Ford Collins. She's our guest today. And Susan, can you tell us again that website?
SusanFordCollins.com, or you could do technologyofsuccess.com, or you could go to Amazon or Audible and look for Blur. It's there and waiting for you.
And if someone wants to listen to the podcast of this show, they can recommend to their friends, go to nccradio.org. That's O-R-G, nccradio.org. Simply look for Secrets of Success and then the show Blur. Susan, thank you for being with us today.
It was a delight, Bill. Thank you.
I'd like to let our audience know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.